Hi, ladies. Today we are on week 4, day 1, pages 43 and 45, 43 and 44 in your packet. So before we get started, we're actually going to be starting a new topic today, and our topic is on volume. So with this unit, we have a couple of vocabulary words that I want to go over before we get started because these are words that are going to be extremely important moving forward in this unit. So our learning target today is I can find the volume of solid figures. And if you take a look up at this very first vocabulary card, you'll notice that you see these little cubes, and these are really important. So the volume is when you multiply the length times the width times the height. So you'll notice right here it says 4 times 2 times 2. So you'll notice that the length down here is 4 because there's 4 cubes across. So that's our length. Our width is going to be how wide our shape is, which represents this 2 because there are 2 shapes wide. And then the height is how tall, and there are two cubes high. So you would take 4 times 2, which is 8, 8 times 2, which gives you 16. So your volume would be 16 cubic units. So the volume is the number of cubic units needed to fill a solid figure. So now we'll go down to this word cube. The cube is just that little box. And it's a solid figure with 6 identical squares as its faces. So it's kind of like picking up like a block, how it has all the different sides. So a cube has 6 equal sides, or what they call faces. A cubic unit is actually a type of measurement. So each of the sides of the cube is identical. So the volume of a cube is 1 cubic unit by 1 cubic unit. So the length is 1, the width is 1, and the height is 1. So a cubic unit is the volume of a cube that measures 1 unit along each of its edges or sides. So the edge is kind of talking about like this bottom portion and then that side portion. So all of those are what we call edges. A rectangular prism is going to be all of these little boxes or cubes put together. So a rectangular prism is a solid figure with 6 rectangular faces. So it doesn't really matter how long or how tall it is, but it's basically like if you were to pick up a bigger cube, it's made up of smaller cubes, but it has all those same faces. So 1, 2, the one on the back is 3, 4 on this side, 5 on this side, and then the bottom would be 6. And then the last vocabulary word is a unit cube. And you'll notice we have cubic unit and we have unit cube. And those are 2 different things. A unit cube is a cube that measures 1 unit along each edge. So this is basically us taking a square, so taking a cube, and saying that each of its sides are 1 unit. Okay, so this cube could be super big or super small, but it's a square. So it's that solid figure with 6 identical faces, whereas a unit cube is actually that size. So each side represents 1 unit. So this is 1, this is 1, this is 1. So 1 times 1 times 1 means that the volume of this is 1. This represents 1 cube, 1 unit cube. Whereas a cubic unit is actually the measurement that you are using to measure the volume of that little cube. So you'll see that formula, so we're over here on the side. The formula for volume is going to be length times width times height. So these letters, L represents length, W represents width, and H represents height. So we take that length along the bottom times the width, which is that side length, and then the height, which is how tall. And that gives us our volume.
How can you measure space inside a solid figure? Think about this question during the lesson. Volume is the number of cubic units needed to pack a solid figure without gaps or overlaps. A cubic unit is the volume of a cube measuring 1 unit on each edge. What is the volume of this rectangular prism? Each cube of a solid figure is 1 cubic unit. Can you use the picture to count the number of unit cubes?
So this kind of is talking about what we were talking about earlier. So what you want to do is you want to look at that length. So how many cubes long is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're starting with 5, and then our length, or I'm sorry, our width is 1, 2, 3. So we have 5 times 3, which is 15, and then we're going to take that times 2, our height, 1, 2. So 15 times 2 would be 30. So inside of this rectangular prism, there are 30 of these little cubes, which means our volume is 30 cubic units.
No, some of the cubes are hidden from view.
You can't see all the cubes in the bottom layer.
So if you're noticing, if you're just looking at this picture, you actually can't. So you would have to use that volume formula in order to solve this. Because like they said, some of the cubes are hidden away. So if you were to count this, you would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you're really just not able to see that bottom layer, although you should be able to see that this top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So you can see that there are 15 cubes here and that the bottom is identical. So if you did 15 on top of 15, it would still give you 30. But you can't just look at this and count those bottom back 2 layers because you can't see them. But you can use other strategies in order to solve.
How many cubes make up the bottom layer? How do you know? There are 15 cubes in the bottom layer. You can count the number of cubes in the top layer since you can see all the cubes. The volume of the bottom layer is 15 cubic units. There are 2 layers. How can you find the number of cubes in the 2 layers combined? Multiply the volume of the bottom layer by 2. You can also add 15 and 15. What is the volume of the rectangular prism?
Select your answer.
So we talked about this. 2 times 15 would give us the same answer as 15 plus 15, which is 13 cubic units.
The volume of the prism is 2 times 15, or 30 cubic units. Now you know how to measure space inside a solid figure.
All right, so now you should be on page 43 of your packet. Remember, this is week 4, day 1. And our learning target today is I can find the volume of solid figures. So we're actually going to skip number 1 and move on to number 2. And on number 2, it says, what is the difference between a unit cube and a cubic unit? And this is when we kind of go back to this and look at a unit cube versus a cubic unit. And we said that a cubic unit is the volume of a cube that measures 1 unit along each edge. So that's kind of that measurement piece. And then the unit cube is the actual cube itself that measures 1 unit along each edge. So the cubic unit is kind of like saying, 6 apples. That's our actual unit. So it'd be like 6 cubic units. So for our answer on number 2, the difference between those 2 vocabulary words is a unit cube has a measure of 1 unit along each edge. And then a cubic unit is a unit of measure. So basically a cubic unit, like I said, is like saying you have 6 trucks or 6 apples. It'd be 6 cubic units. So that is our actual unit. That is what we're measuring as. Oops. All right, so go ahead and get that written down on number 2, and then we'll talk about number 3. All right, so because you don't have unit cubes at home, obviously, to build these boxes of volume on your own, we're going to be really focusing on that formula, which is length times width times height to give us volume. So really important, we want to look at this bottom layer and look at that length. Okay, so we want to start with our length. And we want to kind of focus on this right here. So this is our length along the bottom, which is equal to 2. And then our width is right here along the side, and that's also equal to 2, 1, 2. And then our height is along this portion right here, which is also 2. So at this point, we're taking our length, which is 2, times our width, which is 2, times our height, which is also 2. And if we take 2 times 2, we know we get 4. And then we take another 2, so 4 times 2, which is going to give us 8. But it's not just 8. We have to make sure that we're using that unit of measure, which would be cubic units. So our answer for number 3 is going to be 8 cubic units. So down on number 4, we can look at this. Actually, let's look at number 3 again. So another way to check your work here, because this is just a basic square, you can look at this top layer and say I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you know you have 2 layers of that. So you have a bottom layer and a top layer. So you would take 4 times 2, which would also give you 8 cubic units. So either way is fine because you get the same answer. On number 4, this one's super easy because you only have 1 layer. So really all you have to do is just count up your boxes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we can kind of check this again by using our volume formula, taking that length. So we have a length of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6. A width of 2. So we're going to multiply that by 2, and then a height of only 1 square. So on this, we're taking 6 times 2, which is 12, 12 times 1, which is 12. And then again, cubic units. All right, so let's come down to the bottom and we'll do a couple of these together. I want to focus on number 10 first, and then we'll do number 13. So on number 10, we can do 2 different things. We can count what we see, which is this front portion, and then multiply it by 2 because there are 2 layers, or we can go through and do our length times width times height. So the first thing I want to start with is just figuring out what this space represents. So let's count the faces that we can see. So the faces are these portions right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we know we have 9 boxes or cubes, and then that's done 2 times. So think of this as like a cereal box that has a volume of 9, and then another cereal box laid right next to it that also has a volume of 9, which would be 9 times 2, or like they did earlier, 9 plus 9. And either one of these strategies is going to give you the exact same answer because 9 times 2 is 18 cubic units. Another way that we're going to look at this is just actually doing that length times width times height. So the length here is this front portion, which is 2. Our width is going to be this side portion, which is going to be 1, 2, 3. And then our height is how tall, 1, 2, 3. So then we multiply. 2 times 3 gives us 6. 6 times 3 is 18 cubic units. All right, so down below, this is going to be a little bit different because you have this whole portion that's missing. So you don't want to count for this random portion over here that doesn't have any boxes. So the best thing that I recommend that you do is to separate the two, okay? So we're going to separate these into two separate portions because that's going to actually be able to help us kind of separate them and determine the volume of this portion and the volume of this portion and then add them together. So if we're going to, let's look at this is our, we'll call this A and this B. So A, we can actually see what it represents. All right, so we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this part right here is a volume of 6. And then this portion right here, we're going to do where we see this portion and then we'll multiply it by 2. So we have the faces right here, what we can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we're going to take 8 and do that 2 times. So again, it's like our cereal boxes. We have 2 side by side. So if this is 8, this also is 8. So 8 times 2 gives me 16. But don't forget about this volume right here. And we want to make sure that we add that back in. So when we take our 16 and we add 6 more, we get an answer of 22. It'll let me. So that means that our volume is 22 cubic units. And don't forget, you want to make sure that you have this as your unit measurement because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these cubic units. So just because it's not necessarily us talking about trains or dogs or whatever it may be, this is our unit and you want to make sure that you represent that appropriately. All right, so on the back page, we have a few problems that you're going to be working on. Let's look at number 19. So on number 19, it says, in an election, 471 people voted. Candidate B received 2/3 of the votes. How many votes did candidate B receive? So when you're reading through this, you want to kind of think about how we can represent this question. So in an election, we have 471 people who voted, which means that we have 471 votes. So how you want to kind of read this is candidate B received 2/3 of the 471 votes. And in that situation, you really want to make sure that you're focusing on this word of, because that word tells us what operation we want to make sure that we're using when solving this problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to be taking 471 over 1 and then multiplying it because we know of means multiplication, and you're going to multiply that by 2/3. And then that's going to tell us how many votes candidate B received. All right, so now look at number 20. Number 20 says, Miss Helston's storage closet is 3 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 7 feet high. Can she fit 67 boxes that each have a volume of 1 cubic foot in her closet? So 1 cubic foot would represent kind of these little boxes. So basically 67 boxes would be 67 of these little boxes right here. We want to focus on long, wide, and high because when we're focusing on those 3 units, that tells us that we're focusing on volume. So basically what you want to do on this one is figure out what the volume is of her closet. So we're going to take our length, which is 3, times our width, which is 3, times our height, which is 7. And that's going to give us the cubic units of her closet. So at this point, we want to figure out, does this amount allow for 67 boxes to fit inside of her closet? So if her closet is less than 67 cubic units, that would mean that she can't fit all of those boxes. But if it was more than 67, then that means that she can. So what you're going to do is you want to solve this problem and then explain your answer. Okay, explain to me why she can or cannot fit those 67 boxes in her closet. All right, so you have a couple of problems on the back that you're going to be working through independently, as well as a couple of problems on the front. Remember, before you go to Pearson Realize and do our assignment for today, which is 42720 Quick Check, you want to make sure that you do this assignment, okay? So you want to watch this video, do the entire assignment before you go and do your homework assignment on Pearson Realize. That is the assignment that I'm really looking at. These assignments are more for practice, okay? So this is that practice page. You're working through this. This is where you're trying to kind of help yourself learn the material, okay? So you're doing all of these problems to help yourself practice the material and learn the material. When you go to Pearson Realize, this is the assignment that's telling me if you understood the assignment that we did together from the YouTube video. So please make sure that you're doing these assignments first before going to Pearson Realize. And as always, if you ever have a question on either Pearson Realize or this assignment in front of you, please make sure that you're reaching out either through my email or through the Remind app, or bringing your questions to our Zoom meeting tomorrow. All right, ladies, nice job.